Hello and welcome to the program. Our today's lecture is about self-enhancement. The objectives set for the lecture are to understand the concept and meaning of self, to get acquainted with parts of self, to understand Rogerian concept of self, to understand the concept of self-enhancement, to go through different levels and strategies of self-enhancement, to get acquainted with advantages and disadvantages of self-enhancement. First, let's have a brief introduction. Self is the incorporeal entity that propels us from within. It is the essence that makes life possible. It is self-propelling. Self perceives the world in its unique way and is influenced with previous beliefs, experiences, and motivations. This type of self-concept plays significant role in our beliefs. It motivates people in construction and formulation of our behavior. When we grow, our self-awareness also grows. There are various experiences which help in enhancement of our behavior and self. People specifically have a strong need and desire of being loved and valued by others. Self is the aggregate of the individual consisting of all characteristic features, conscious and unconscious, rational and corporeal. Apart from its fundamental reference to individualism, being and experience, the terms used in psychology is extensive. According to William James, self can refer either to the person as a target of appraisal, that is, one introspectively evaluates how one is doing, or the person as a source of agency, that's one attributes the source of regulation of perception, thought and behavior to one's body or mind. Carl Jung maintained that the self gradually develops by a process of individuation, which is not complete until late maturity is reached. Alfred Adler identified the self with the individual's lifestyle, the manner in which he or she seeks fulfillment. Karen D. Horney held that one's real self as opposed to one's idealized self-image and consists of one's unique capacities for growth and development. Gordon W. Allport substituted the word proprium for the self and conceived of it as the essence of individual consisting of a gradual developing body sense, identity, self-estimate and set of personal values, attitudes and intentions. Now let's have the concept of self. The self is pre-programmed part of every human being which authorizes people to relate to others. In psychology, the self is defined as a process a person thinks about and outlooks his or her attributes and motive within the world. It's a truly energetic and tangled concept because it covers both the inner and the outer self. It is the merging of components such as body, feelings, beliefs and sensations that constitute the uniqueness and recognition of person. Self in terms of psychology has two meanings that are perspective and feelings of a person towards himself and something the whole psychological process that controls behavior and self-adjustment. A person's introspection is based on how they see themselves, while self-concept is a more broad assessment of the self. Mainly constructed on how a person perceives themselves, merits themselves, notices about themselves, and experiences about themselves. According to Baumeister, the self is the individual's belief about himself or herself including the person's attributes and who and what the self is. Rosenberg defines the self broadly as the totality of an individual's thoughts and feelings, having reference to himself as an object. According to Carl Rogers, self is the organized, consistent set of perceptions and beliefs about oneself. William James says that self-worth is based on two elements: our actual achievements and our actual aspirations. According to Augustine, the self has an immortal soul. A soul cannot live in this world without a body, for it is considered as a unity of body and self. It is an important element of man which governs and defines himself. To Hume, the self is that to which our several impressions and ideas are supposed to have a reference. According to Immanuel Kant, we all have an inner and outer self, which together form our consciousness. Moving on to Gilbert Ryle, the self is the way people behave. The self is basically our behavior. Freud's view of the self was multi-tiered, divided among the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. Some researchers are of the opinion that the idea of self is popped up and shaped in social reciprocity, especially when a child is labeled by someone she or he starts thinking about self. Thus, self stands in social experience. Gradually, people internalize a particular view of self, which becomes a dynamic source that controls behavior. Some part of our self is personal to us, and only we exclusively know about that. Another part is public or common, which is known to others. Also, there is a part of self which comes from our membership of the group. This kind of self is called collective self or social identity. Now let's have a look over the parts of self. The self consists of three main parts: self-knowledge, also called self-concept; agent self, also called executive self function; interpersonal self, also called public self. Now, what self-knowledge is? It is the set of beliefs about oneself or information about the self. Self-knowledge in psychology is actual, genuine information one possesses about oneself. This information includes our emotional state, personality trait, relationships, behavioral patterns, opinions, beliefs, values, needs, goals, preferences, and social identity. Morin and Rassi in 2021 and Schaffner in 2020 listed 5 reasons self-knowledge is essential for psychological growth. It convinces the impulses to learn and make sense of experience. It put a stop to conflict between self-perception and others' perception of us. It liberates us from the illogical urges of our unconsciousness. It simplifies visionary responses rather than nervousness. It is a significant initial step for positive change. According to Brown, there are 5 sources that contribute to the reservoir of self-knowledge. First one is physical world. This category of information is limited to physical information such as height, weight, and eye color. The second one is social comparison. This source of self-knowledge occurs when comparing ourselves with others. Another one is reflected appraisals. This source of self-knowledge stems from others' evaluation of us. The term denotes the fact that we see ourselves reflected through the eyes of others. Another one is introspection. This source of self-knowledge is derived through inward observations of thoughts, feelings, motives, and desires. Introspection is interwoven with the integrally connected to self-knowledge. Self-perception. In this category of self-knowledge, we learn about ourselves through observing and examining our own behavior. Next one is agent self. The self that has goals, plans, and control over voluntary actions is called agent self. It is involved, including both control over other people and self-control. It is the internal capacity to choose and to direct one's own behavior. The executive function of self is used whenever people plan, choose, or control their own actions. Now, the next part of the self is interpersonal self. It is the ability to exhibit self to others throughout. Interpersonal self is evident in situations of self-presentation, being a group member or partner in a relationship, a person's social roles and reputation. We develop as interpersonal selves not only by experiencing ourselves in our interaction with the emotional responses to the others, but also by experiencing and internalizing the other's perspective on ourselves. Now let us have a look over the Rogerian concept of self. Self, according to Carl Rogers, is one's ever-evolving perception of personal identity and is made up of self-image and ideal self and the true self. Carl Rogers personifies that humanistic approach in both theory and practice. His personality theory proposed a self-actualizing tendency as the foundation of personality development. Self-concept emerges as a crucial product of the process. Rogers defines self as an organized, consistent, conceptual gestalt composed of perceptions of the characteristics of I or me, and the perception of the relationship I and me to various aspects of life, together the values attached to those perceptions. As the individuals strive towards actualization, the self is divided into two categories. The real self. By ideal, Rogers is suggesting something not real, something that is always out of our reach, the standard we cannot meet. Thus, Rogers' personality theory distinguishes between two personalities, the real self, which is created and developed through the actualizing tendency. It is the self that one can become. The demands of society, however, do not always support the actualizing tendency, as we are focused to live under conditions that are out of step within our tendencies. The second one is the ideal self. The ideal self is the ideal created through the demands of society. Rogers does not see it as something to strive for, that is the real self, but an ideal imposed on us we can never fully reach. Rogers' view of hidden personality relates to the person one could be given the right circumstances within society, and for an individual to be truly happy, and for self-actualization to be realized. Their public and private selves must be as similar as possible. For an individual to be truly happy and for self-actualization to be realized, the public and hidden selves must be as similar as possible. Rogers identified one's self-concept as the frame from which personality is developed. It is the purpose of each person to seek congruence, means balance, in three areas of their lives. This balance is achieved with self-actualization. Self-actualization deals with three areas such as self-worth, self-image, and ideal self. Now, what self-worth is? Self-worth or self-esteem comprises that we think about ourselves. Rogers believed feelings of self-worth developed in early childhood and were formed from the interaction of the child with the mother and father. Now, what self-image is? Self-image includes the influence of our body image on inner personality. At a simple level, we might perceive ourselves as a good or a bad person, beautiful or ugly. Self-image affects how a person thinks, feels and behaves in the world. Now, what ideal self is? This is the person who we would like to be. It consists of our goals and ambitions in life and is dynamic, that is forever changing. The ideal self in childhood is not the ideal self in our teens or late 20s, etc. Now, let's move towards what self-enhancement is. Self-enhancement is believed to be a fundamental motive to increase the positivity of one's self-views. Self-enhancement can be conceptualized as a motive to bring one's self-view in line with a desired state, one's ideal self, or one's aspirations with respect to self-views. Self-enhancement tendencies are instrumental psychological responses aimed at promoting positive self-views, as they are believed to be driven by a desire to attain or maintain self-esteem. This is a self-enhancement motive is believed to guide people towards situations in which they believe excel or situations in which they can promote their positive qualities, which will help them increase their self-esteem. This motive becomes especially prominent in situations of threat, failure, or blow to one's self-esteem. Self-enhancement is thus the motivation to maximize the positivity of one's self-views. It involves a preference for positive over negative self-views. It is a tendency to maintain unrealistically positive self-views. Self-enhancement can occur in a variety of ways. A few examples include exaggerating one's virtues, claiming that one's successes are a reflection of ability, whereas failures are due to external circumstances, or preferentially remembering positive rather than negative information about oneself. Related to self-concept is the processing that we use to bolster self-esteem. Now, let's move towards the definitions of self-enhancement. According to APA Dictionary of Psychology, self-enhancement is any strategic behavior designed to increase either self-esteem or the esteem of others. Self-enhancement can take the form of pursuing success or merely distorting events to make them seem to reflect better on the self. Self-enhancement has been considered one of the innate psychological needs within human beings, according to Allport. According to Rogers, during the enhancement process, regardless of interpersonal actions or merely cognitive mechanism, the main purpose is to emphasize a belief that one is competent and valuable human being. Cognitive experiential self-theory embraces the idea that self-enhancement is human's essential need. According to this theory, rather than have independent views about self, people's views towards themselves are dependent on several external causes, such as past experiences, behaviors, personalities, and grow through its interaction with other people. Now, what are the levels of self-enhancement? According to Skidis and Gregg in 2005, there are 4 levels of self-enhancement. Self-enhancement manifests itself at 4 levels as an observed effect, an ongoing process, a personality trait, and an underlying motive. Now, what an observed effect is? Self-enhancement at the level of an observed effect describes the product of the motive. For example, self-enhancement can produce inflated self-rating, positive illusions. Such ratings would be self-enhancement manifested as an observed effect. It is an observable instance of the motive. Next is an ongoing process. Self-enhancement at the level of an ongoing process describes the actual operation of motive. For example, self-enhancement can result in attributing favorable outcomes to the self and unfavorable outcomes to the others. It is the motive in operation. Next is personality trait. Self-enhancement at the level of personality trait describes habitual or inadvertent self-enhancement. For example, self-enhancement can cause situations to be created to ease the pain of failure, means self-handicapping. The fabrication of such situations or excuses frequently with or without awareness would be self-enhancement manifested as personality trait. It is the repetitive inclination to demonstrate the motive. The last one is underlying motive. Self-enhancement at the level of underlying motive describes the conscious desire to self-enhance. For example, self-enhancement can cause the comparison of the self to a worse other, making the self seem greater in comparison, strategic social comparison. The act of comparing intentionally to achieve superiority would be self-enhancement, manifested as an underlying motive. It is the genuine desire to see the self as superior. Now, what are the different strategies of self-enhancement? There are various types of self-enhancement strategies, which are self-advancement first. It is the promotion of one's own qualities or abilities. This strategy helps individuals enhance positive self-concepts and reduce negative and self-concept. It may occur in front of the public or present in private. Some people may appear they are using this strategy, whereas some are not, but just apply it unconsciously. Thus, people prefer to show their positive side to attract other people and achieve social bonding or rich resources. The situation may occur primarily on individuals with higher level of self-esteem. Next is self-protection. It is the behavior we use so that we avoid losing self-esteem or affecting the esteem of other people. Self-protection refers to tactics that are adopted to avoid falling below a desired standard. Self-protective mechanisms are evoked when an event or series of events threatens to decline an interest below the tolerance level, or when high-level interests fail to advance as anticipated. A common self-protective mechanism is to assume that unacceptable present circumstances will improve in the future. People who are in financial difficulty, for example, might dream of winning the lottery and deflect current difficulties with the vague assumption of future riches. Next is self-reflection. Self-reflection and understanding the self are two sides of the same coin. In order to self-reflect, it is important to understand oneself. And in order to understand oneself, it is important to self-reflect. Once we understand the concept of self and self-reflection, they can help our self-esteem, improve our relationships with others, improve the quality of our lives and work, deal with shyness or lack of confidence, and make us more understanding of other people's conditions and more. Self-reflection helps in developing skills and revives the effectiveness of the same. If we don't self-reflect, then we are likely to continue carrying on doing things and making decisions as we have always done. Now, the last one is adaptability. Adaptability is a key skill for a more positive and constructive personal life, mental health, professional life, social relations, business, making products, and more. But adaptability is not so simple. In order to be adaptable, one has to use a range of other skills, as it requires using a range of critical thinking skills. One has to understand the circumstances, the people, the conditions, the limitations, be able to predict, be able to look at different perspectives, and also put aside our own pride. It requires taking a step back or reflecting, and like an eagle looking at the wide picture. Now, let us move towards the advantages of self-enhancement. It increases self-awareness. It helps us to become more self-aware and get to know ourselves better. It helps us to face the harsh reality of life. It helps us to focus on different experiences and challenges which make us more aware of our personality, thoughts, and feelings. It enhances our strengths. It lets us identify our personal strengths and play on them. It gives us better understanding of what we are seeking and what we are likely to thrive and excel. It overcomes weaknesses. We all have strengths and weaknesses that shape our personality. It is that imperfections that make us humans. Accepting our weaknesses help us to know the root cause and be determined to overcome them. Next is stepping out of comfort zone. The comfort zone is the dangerous place to be in. It surely feels good, but it also denotes stagnancy. And where there is stagnancy, one can never find growth. It improves mental health. Self-enhancement has a positive effect on mental health. When we work on ourselves, we get to know ourselves better, which lets us to deal with our thoughts and emotions more effectively. It gives a sense of purpose. Self-enhancement gives your life purpose and meaning. It helps us to stay focused on our life goals, make us feel alive, and keep us motivated. It improves physical and mental well-being by keeping us on right track. With a sense of purpose, we learn to accept all the challenges that come along. It gives more clarity. Gaining clarity lets you stay focused and not engage in anything that takes you away from your goal. It will remove the threats of confusion and indecisiveness, which in turn helps us to gain clarity about our life. It instills a learning attitude. Self-enhancement leads to self-improvement, which brings an extremely positive attitude towards learning. When we are aware of our shortcomings, we openly receive feedback in order to improve. It cultivates self-love. Self-enhancement cultivates self-love and compassion, which builds our confidence and self-esteem. It is not changing ourselves out of frustration, but focusing to overcome mental hurdles that stop us to reach highest potential. Now, what are the disadvantages of self-enhancement? First, it overemphasizes negatives. Self-enhancement can impact people negatively because they become overconfident about their abilities. They will attribute past successes to their own skill and reject the role of timing or other factors in those outcomes. This can be followed by the failure or setback that cause people to lose faith in their capabilities and to develop increased stress and depression. Second one is negative distortions of ourselves. Self-enhancement can lead to a self-absorbed, conceited and fussy personality. Constant self-criticism makes a person needy and insecure. It can lead to a lower ability to see opportunities as well as a decreased tendency to capitalize on these opportunities. This means that the heightened sense of stress comes from both the perception and the change in behavior that come from it. Dear students, let us conclude now. Self-enhancement denotes a class of psychological phenomena that involves taking a tendencies positive view of oneself. Most individuals overestimate their strengths and underestimate or neglect their weaknesses. When individuals exaggerate or emphasize the positive aspect of their self-concept or downplay their negative aspects, their self-enhancement may affect how they behave towards others and how others behave towards them. Self-enhancement may entail social consequences if they are relative rather than absolute. Absolute self-enhancement occurs when people view themselves more positively than their actual qualities warrant. Relative self-enhancement occurs when people view themselves more positively than they view other individuals. People process, remember and judge self-relevant information as well as present and compare themselves in a manner that will place the self in the best possible light. Self-enhancement is also related to a self-protection motive. People engage in self-protection when they strive to deny undesirable aspects of themselves. Self-enhancement refers to claiming as much good as one can about one's strengths and achievements. Dear students, this was all about today's lecture that was about self-enhancement. Hope you understood well. Thank you.